What? I think we're going here. Okay, I didn't ask to leave. I think we're going live here. We are recording. I am showing myself on. I'm going to double check myself on YouTube and Substack, but welcome. If you're able to join me here, welcome to the first live with Imago Dad. Brandon Wilborn, and we're going to talk about Beowulf today. I've been going through some essays on that, and I've got some coffee and a drink, a drink of water as well. I'm just going to double check and see what's what. Make sure we're actually streaming. And of course, I don't know exactly how. This is the first time I'm doing this. I don't know how to check if I'm streaming on Substack. I might have to go to the actual page. No, where are we? It's now live. It says it's live. I'm just gonna have to trust it and see what we think here. There's no notifications. Hey, there I am. I am by myself currently, and it's fairly live. I'm gonna check YouTube as well. So if you jump on and catch me, I would just say, hey, tell me where you're calling in from. Tell me where you're joining on the internet. I'm going to get goofy because, again, I'm new on this stuff. And it's probably, I'm willing to bet. Yep. All right, I'm in. It's a defense mechanism, getting goofy. Anyway, welcome. I am here to talk about Beowulf. Like I said, I did a few essays on it, and did I close my live? Passed. Canceled. I'm going to assume I'm still live on Substack. I don't know if I'm live on Substack. Okay, I still am. Okay, there we go. We're good. Anyway, Beowulf, if you've never read it, then that's a great time to get into it, because guess what? The movies are not much like the actual poem. We're looking at J.R.R. Tolkien's version. It is not the one that a lot of people talk about these days as often, even though it is Tolkien. Everybody loves him. But other people are talking about a different translation, Seamus Haney, I think, if I said that right. And I've not read that one, unless it was, quite a while back. So I think I wanted to go over a basic of the storyline, kind of talk about what is in Beowulf, and then we can look at Seamus Haney. We'll talk about the storyline. We'll talk about some of the lessons that I've already pulled from Beowulf for dads and raising men, and just the excitement of this kind of mythic history fantasy thing blending. If you think historical fiction is a new thing, Beowulf's 1,000 years old, and that's exactly what it's doing. So, yeah, eat it. It's not new. Nothing new under the sun. We just can't be that creative. We can make new things, but not new things. So, Beowulf is. We're going to look at the lessons I've already pulled. I want to talk about one final one I didn't get to do an essay on or a video on, and talk about Tolkien and how Beowulf's dragon kind of shows up in The Hobbit, especially, and in just the picture of Smaug and what he's like, and how you can see the echo of the dragon and Beowulf in Smaug. We'll see that, and then I just want to talk about that as an inspiration of how his fiction can inspire us, how I, as a writer, have been inspired both by Tolkien and now by Beowulf, and seeing his inspiration has deepened things for me. And then I want to just look at the movie comparisons. Maybe I should start off with at least a movie trailer because they're hilarious. The the movie adaptations of Beowulf have been so far off the mark, as if it's not cool enough to have a single guy arm wrestle a giant troll to the point of death. Like and then fight a dragon. Like, as if it wasn't cool enough, they thought, "No, no, we can make that totally better. We can make that way more interesting." But, they all fall short. They all end up being Hollywood and losing the character and the soul of the story in the process, and in some cases, actively corrupting the soul of the viewer as well. So we'll get to that. All right, I'm gonna try and find where I have chat. There it is. See if anybody wants to join me or be around. I'm hoping I get chat through. I wonder if I pull this up. I've got 3 people watching, it says. If you're watching, throw a chat and say hello. Let me know. All right. Let me know where you're from and whether you've read Beowulf before. And if not, then let's get into the story real quick. So Beowulf is from uh, it's an English poem that is over 1,000 years old, but the only surviving copy we have is about 1,000 years old. And lots of people still think that Tolkien is one of the best translators of Old English in since in the last 100 years. So his version is it makes it really accessible to a modern reader. He does it not just in poetry, but in a kind of a narrative poem style. And so while there's sometimes an odd phrasing, as if you were reading Shakespeare or something, but I if you read it over again, you usually pick up what they mean. So the storyline is pretty straightforward. It's cool. It's based in Hrothgar, and Hrothgar is a king in Scandinavia. He's one of the Danes, and he has won a kingdom. He has battled his neighbors and won. He has peace and prosperity. His men are happy, and he has had a hall built called Heorot. They party every night. They get together and drink their mead, and they celebrate their freedom, and they celebrate all the gold they've won and the battles they've won. And then they, it becomes well known. It becomes a famous hall. When we get to the story, it's several years afterwards, and for the last 12 years, a monster named Grendel has been visiting the hall every night and slaughtering people. And he carries some of them off in a sack to enjoy their bodies later for a snack. But he has driven off or killed all of the mighty men who might rise up against him, and all the ones that are left recognize there's no way to win against this guy. They don't quite know it, but he has an enchantment on his skin that no normal weapon can hurt him. And so he has his way with this kingdom for 12 years every night, so that by dusk all of the men clear out of the hall. They finish and have an early night of carousing and go to bed away from the hall so that Grendel won't come and get them. He's the ultimate boogeyman. And the book doesn't really describe him exactly, except to just clarify how evil and wicked he is. He is an enemy of God, and a he's an enemy of God. He is from the race of Cain. He's linked to the ancient monsters of giants and other monsters that come from the race of Cain in a biblical reference, but not exactly a biblical, a faithful biblical reading. Because yeah, there's no instance where the Bible just says, yeah, monsters came from Cain, but it mixes some things with like Genesis 6 and things like that. So it's pulling in some mytho-history, some biblical ideas, but it's not a straight, simple reading of the Bible. Now, giants in the Bible, absolutely. This is a different thing saying they're monsters. He is something else. And again, he is not quite human. He's this evil thing and he hates God. And the revelry of the men, the song and the happiness and the laughter causes him actual pain because he's evil and he hates all of the blessings that men receive. So, pretty good villain. Beowulf lives among the Geats and he is not well received or not well thought of in his own land. And he hears about the problems at Heorot. Probably when he was a young preteen or a teen, he hears about it, but he waits until he's ready. And at a young age, when he is a man, but still kind of thought as irresponsible and maybe a little wild and selfish, he asks for permission to go and sail across the sea with a bunch of other guys and take take on Grendel. Now, the men of his kingdom and his council and his king, they all agree and think, "Yep, go earn your way, buddy. Go ahead and make sure that you come back, victorious." There's just kind of it's unclear in some ways. You could read it as if, yeah, we'd kind of be okay if you don't come back. The way that Beowulf talks about it, the way that the editors talks about it. But he goes across the sea. He walks into Hrothgar's court and he promises to defeat the monster. There's some political wranglings and some challenges, and then he convinces everybody to leave the hall except for his own men, and he decides, you know what, this monster, he doesn't have armor and he doesn't have weapons, so I'm going to fight the monster without armor or weapons. And he strips down to just his tunic and waits, pretending to sleep. Well, it's not too long before Grendel comes in, busts the door open, swallows one guy whole, pretty much, and then finally goes to grab Beowulf. And Beowulf strikes up, grabs him by the hand, and it's described that Beowulf has the strength of 40 men in his hands. So he wrestles this monster, and immediately Grendel decides, oh, this is more than I bargained for. And he tries to back away. But Beowulf has him. So he's got him in this grip that's iron grip in one hand at least, and they're wrestling and flailing all around the hall, the mead hall. And eventually it gets to the point where Grendel is so fearful because of the match in strength and the potential that he might actually lose, that he wrestles in such a way that he rips his own arm off and flees. And they just have a trail of blood to follow. It's a little bit gruesome, but it's not overly gory. It might be something to talk about in fiction with the perspective of from a Christian perspective of what is acceptable in fiction and how far should we go with gore and things like that. So clearly this is a mortal wound. He's lost his arm. He doesn't have medical care. He's going to die. But he flees, and they all take it as if he's dead, and they're thrilled. They're excited. So they run a big party for Beowulf the next night. They hammer what remains of Grendel's arm to the lintel, and they're celebrating. They go ahead and stay up past midnight and go to sleep in the hall as they would normally, were it not for Grendel. Except that night, they're attacked again because Grendel's mother wants her revenge. So she comes in and causes all kinds of havoc and escapes without being caught. So now there's multiple deaths, if I remember correctly. Anyway, it's carnage. It's horrible. Everybody's now terrified again. And now Beowulf decides, okay, I got to go take care of another monster, except now I really don't know anything about this one. So we get the second battle in the story where Beowulf is taken to this lake where Tolkien does a great yeah, he's got a picture on the back of the cover where you can see this lake in a depression that just looks eerie. It's described that there are dragons, sea monsters all around the lake. And his enemy, oddly enough, his enemy, out of respect, gives him his own family sword. And he jumps into the water. And he's diving down and down and down into this deep lake. And there are other sea monsters floating around him. But as soon as he's in the water, Grendel's mother decides, this is my chance. I'm going to take out the murderer of my son. And she attacks him. And we get no description of what she's like. We just get the story of this battle underwater in a horrible way that he's afraid he's going to drown. And they must come into a underwater cave or something, because he doesn't drown, obviously. But he's fighting against her, and he's so strong that he breaks almost any sword he uses. And so this one breaks under him. It fails him, much like the guy who gave it to him would have failed him. But he thinks he's going to die down there. And then Providence gives him this ancient giant sword, forged by giants with magical etchings on it. And he sees this thing on the wall and grabs for it and takes out Grendel's mother. And then he finds Grendel's body and he cuts off the head just to prove that Grendel is dead. And the sword melts. The sword can't handle the evil that it has just vanquished. And it's a crazy story about magic swords and monsters and underwater fights. And so Beowulf gets back out. He brings Grendel's head and the hilt of the sword to prove his story. And again, he is celebrated. And he's lavished with gifts from Hrothgar, because that's what you do when somebody saves your kingdom. And hey, welcome. If you are joining me, go ahead and say hi in the chat. Let me know where you're joining from and if you've read Beowulf. So he gets all these gifts and he almost immediately goes home. He doesn't just stay there. He goes home. He presents most of the gifts to his own king, and he is finally welcomed and accepted into his own kingdom as this hero who did a good neighborly deed, but also one that earned him glory and valor. And from there, he goes on to become more and more respected. The story kind of cuts off there. We get to see him in court being smart, and then it cuts off until he is now king after his own king has passed on. And he's not just a king, he is an old king now. And he's lived and done a good job managing his kingdom, warring for them and saving these people. And then when everything looks like it's going well, there's a man who's escaping his own master, a slave, and he sneaks into a cave to escape the master, to escape the men that are following him. And he finds treasure, and he's thrilled by this treasure. So he steals a single cup, and in the process, he wakes a dragon that nobody knew was there because it had been sleeping on top of its treasure. And so he escapes, and he's actually given credit for having the bravery to and the courage and the conniving, I guess, to escape. But he reaches Beowulf's court first, and the dragon rises up, starts torching the countryside. Beowulf decides to go out and fight it, and he brings a coterie of men with him, all of his nobles, because all of his warriors, his ring pledged warriors, guys who he had given rings to in pledge for his for their service. But he decides at the last minute, nobody else can withstand this monster. I fought Grendel. I fought Grendel's mother. I can take this thing on myself. I don't want anybody else to die. So Beowulf goes in there by himself against a dragon. He gets a metal shield at least, so he's not having a wood shield that'll burn up, but he fights this thing and he is wounded. He wounds it in return. And one young man named Wiglaf sees his beloved king faltering, and rides in to help. And between the two of them, they're able to kill the dragon. But all the other guys flee in terror. At least they run off into the woods where they can not be seen. And so they kill the dragon, but in the process, Beowulf is also mortally wounded. And in his last moments, Wiglaf chastises the other knights when they come out of the woods and is like, how dare you? You were just unfaithful, cowards. How dare you do this for this good king? And Beowulf takes both he gets to see a little bit of the treasure, which he's very glad of. He makes plans for this treasure that he has just won from the dragon, and then he makes plans for his secession and gives the kingdom to Wiglaf, asking that they give appropriate amounts of the treasure to the knights, and the rest will be buried with him and all this stuff. But it's not a tragic ending. It's a realistic ending for a man whose life was about fighting monsters and defeating evil in that form. He could have just as easily died in battle, perhaps, but he doesn't. He dies fighting the same kinds of monsters that only he had fought before that, and other men were too afraid of or not strong enough to handle. So it's a heroic ending, but it's still got some sadness to it. It's beautiful, actually. It's the kind of ending that a lot of men think they want, but very few get. Hey, if you are joining, please go ahead and let me know where you're joining from, and if you've read Beowulf, and just say hi. So that's the basic storyline. I think I want to go on here. Okay, it's participants chat. I don't know if there's any chat here. I sort of watch myself on the other line and mute. I've written a lot of essays here about Beowulf on Substack and kind of set my take on not necessarily what the story is teaching, because it wasn't specifically a teaching type of book, although we'll hit the microphone. Although there was some of that. It was written around 1000 AD, or at least the copy that we have was copied around 1000 AD. And excuse me, it was from a Christian monk, copied by a Christian monk. But it seems like part of his purpose was to inform the court, or the court of England, that some of the stories they respected from their past, some of the heroes that they looked up to who were pagan, those good characteristics were similar to the Christian values. So courage, loyalty, being a good king, being, generous with your subjects, being loyal in return, standing up for what's right, helping neighbors at sacrifice to yourself. All of these things were Christian values that he was saying, these things are in this pagan hero. And so he's presenting these as things that this newly Christian nation would want to emulate, and the kings especially should want to emulate. They should want to be like Hrothgar and Beowulf in the way that they became kings. So within the story, within the poem, there's these older stories that are woven in about good kings and bad kings and why they were so. There's stories about political wisdom between a king and trying to marry his daughter to another king's son, and how that can go poorly and what the dangers might be. There's a lot, actually. There's almost sermons where they are, both Hrothgar and Beowulf talk about the Christian God, even though they wouldn't necessarily have known the Christian God. And the poet talks about how they were stumbling around, much like Paul might have said the Greeks were, to find the truth, and they would find a little bit of it. So let's give them credit for that. and then we can give them the full truth because we now have the gospel. That's what the poet is trying to do. So there is an educational aspect to it. He's got something of a message, but he's also just got a fun tale, which I think is a cool thing for us to consider. Everybody gets down on storytellers who preach, storytellers who, oh, it's this, they're trying to push this storyline, this whatever. Why would you spend all that time unless it meant something to you to some degree? Now, you can do that artfully and you can do that inartfully, but almost every story has some level of worldview that comes along with it, something you want to say, even if it's just courage good or cowardice bad. You know, like there's something you want to say, and you can say it as a sermon within the story, or you can just say it as telling a story of a hero that everybody goes, wow, I would like to be a man like that. I think that's what we look at for dads. We want stories that express, I guess, a positive view of manhood and masculinity and what it looks like to walk through life and focus on the things that matter. We want that for our kids, for our sons especially. And we want our daughters to be able to see that in us and in the men we reveal or that we are friends with. It's hard. It's hard to not make your story preachy, but everybody's going to have some kind of message. So, you know, don't be too hard on people who maybe lose the plot a little bit while they're doing their little preachy thing. You know, sometimes that makes it unbearable to watch. Sometimes it's still enjoyable. Which I think, yeah, I don't know. I'm going to share my screen real quick. Make sure I'm pulled up on the right spot. Share my screen. If you're joining, let me know where you're from and if you have read Beowulf. Window. There we are. Here's some of the. If you go to my Substack, you will find multiples of the Beowulfs in these tabs here or just on the homepage. Some of the more recent stuff is almost all Beowulf. Of course, and now I'm echoing myself. I will go ahead and throw this link into the chat here for those essays because see if that shows up. That's all the Beowulf essays. And you can see those lessons I picked up. Of one is just the concept or the theme of Beowulf not having worth, and how do men find their worth? How do they become worthy, in a sense, if you know what I mean? I am going to check my layout. There we go. Hey, I get to be on the bottom now. How do they become worthy? And why those typical things we aim for, gold and glory and strength, they're never enough. They're not the things we're meant to be going for. Talk about overcoming passivity. That to me is one of the big problems in the Christian manhood thing. Is we're kind of following this idea of, hey, there's this general feeling we should just be nice, and that's not courageous manhood, not courageous faith. Is it wrong to expect rewards? A lot of people feel guilty about expecting a reward for doing good things. I think there's a lesson in there that no, sometimes that is justice. We talked about courage and what makes it easier. Talked about picking the right tool based on the job. Sometimes there's a monster, and sometimes there's just somebody who disagrees with you, and you can't clobber them the way you would a monster. And preparing kids for evil, and how to introduce the idea that there are bad things out in the world. When do you do that? How do you do that? And how that's very personal. And then finally, this last one was the war between the generations. And I didn't really use it as a strong example in there, but the example of Wiglaf is the picture of that two men from different generations working together toward a common goal, and how building up that trust becomes the factor in passing the torch. It's worth studying that book, that connection between those two men, even though it's brief in the story, is powerful. So I would recommend looking at that because, yeah, they're fighting a dragon for this last little bit, but there's history there, you can tell, and it's the one man who steps up at the most danger to himself, steps in to save another, save his boss, save his king. He's the one who gets rewarded. Let me see if I have. Oh, next time I need to have my commonplace book up here. There's great lines in for Wiglaf too. Wiglaf was lamenting and saying, "Alas, Beowulf, ere he went, had not more carefully considered the old possessor's will that cursed the gold. If he had not more carefully considered the dragon." And then he speaks, "Oft must it be that many men through one man's will shall suffer woe, even as is now befallen us." So sometimes a great man, through his will, through his choices, will cause others to suffer, even just the grief of losing them because they were brave to death. That's definitely one for dads to think about. What are you willing in your family's life that might cause woe to your family? It's a tough question. If you've got a response on that one for yourself, feel free to share it. I'd have to think about that one more often. I think being too focused on things that are not about family time and character, um, too focused on work that isn't going to be for some eternal benefit or even just for some family benefit. You know, uh, those are the ones I feel. At the same time, you have to provide, so it's always something where you're going to have to uh, make choices. You're going to have to weigh the options and weigh what's most important. That's tough. It's a tough thing. Let me see if I can find that is right near the end. Oh, it's too long. It's too long. But he does say this one line, which I think for the guys who were cowards is huge. He says, "Death is more sweet for every man of worth than life with scorn." I think that's one our current culture would need to hear. We need some guys willing to brave hard things. And if being scorned because of your cowardice or your bad character were worse than a death sentence for more people, meaning their honor would be struck so much that to be scorned for doing wrong would be enough to prevent them from doing it. That's old stuff. That's the culture we nostalgize about and we wish we had back. Now, there goes a lot that goes along with that, but that's one I think yeah. I I I actually think shame would be a good thing for a lot of us if we were shamed in that way. Shamed when we actually do wrong, not just shamed because of who we are or what we've done. That's not that big a deal. Um, or didn't do. But if it's actual issues of courage and character and what's right and wrong, usually it's more just, some silly thing about us or an embarrassment. It's not necessarily right or wrong, but, and then people use shame as they act like it's not a tool, but it is a tool. People act like shame is this horrible thing that people always do against each other. But most of the time, we feel the shame before other people have gotten any digs in. And so I think that's where we see that it's a tool. And we need to understand that there are times when the shame is appropriate and times when it's not. And that takes some maturity, which a lot of us are lacking. All right. Anyway, Wiglaf has some good ones. I want to jump in if I can find it. Where he actually meets the dragon. I tended to highlight the things that were focused more in on the men and stuff because I was looking for that side. But I have a quote here, at least I can share. And this is where I think we can start talking about Tolkien. One of the lines is then was the keeper of the barrow swollen with wrath, purposing fell beast with fire to avenge his precious drinking vessel. Now the invader did begin to spew forth glowing fires and set ablaze the shining halls. The light of the burning leapt forth to the woe of men. He was a horde guardian who scorched the ground as he scoured and hunted for the trespassed who had troubled his sleep. And we have this quote from Tolkien about his own heart, saying, I desired dragons with a profound desire. Of course, I, in my timid body, did not wish to have them in the neighborhood, but the world that contained even the imagination of Fafnir was richer and more beautiful at whatever the cost of peril. I'll see if I can pull that up on. There was somebody on Substack who had that with a beautiful piece of art. But you can see, okay, he is desirous of this dangerous thing, but also obviously terrified of it. Why? Why would you be desirous of something so terrible? Here it is. Here I can. Sowing Wonder, they put up some good pictures here. Let me share this real quick. Screen. There it is. So yeah, I desired dragons with profound desire. And this beautiful image here that somebody painted from Michael Rose. I'd like to see more of his stuff someday. I think it's worth talking about that. Excuse me for a second while I get another drink. Tolkien had this fascination with dragons, and I think a lot of people do because of there's mystery, there's power, there's curiosity about what exactly they are. And there are certainly dragons in the Bible. Satan is described as one. There's evidence that several of the angels might have been described in similar ways. If you get into the Hebrew and stuff like that, Michael Heiser talks a lot about that. I'm not a full believer in Heiser's his hermeneutic there. I think he may overstate some things, and I think he relies really heavily on the extra biblical literature in ways that maybe push that a little bit too prominently for my take. But I understand what he's doing with the Hebrew and the language and what he sees there, except that a lot of times when he sees that language, it's also poetry. And so taking poetry too literally, even when it's talking about the invisible world, that's where it's like, okay, this is there's a challenge here. I think because it's poetry, we want to hold that lightly. That's my personal take. But I also love the idea of there is this unseen world, which I don't disagree with that part. There is an unseen world. There are enemies. There are fallen angels. There are um, forces that work against God and that work against us, the one that are attacking us. And that's where one of those things. This is one of those things that Beowulf is sharing with us, is that there are monsters out there, whether they're still real or whether they have been wiped out to some degree, like with guys like Beowulf or St. George or something, or whether they are being, uh, what's the word? M- Whether they have just transformed into a different way of presenting themselves, and whether they are just using different tactics to try to pull us away from God. That's the question I have. I think again, Heiser just takes some of those passages a little too on the nose when they're poetry, and so I think it's hard to say one way or the other. But Tolkien, though, sees it as myth. He doesn't have Heiser's perspective about, potential for actual dragons and giants in the Old Testament. He's got a flat into the modern perspective, looking at this from the ancients as myth and paganism. And so he takes the history of Hrothgar, which we have evidence of, and he takes these ancient tales of the strongman Beowulf that we have other examples of, apparently, or other mentions of, but not a lot of details. And he says that these things have been mashed together into this poem, so that we've got a real place, real people, in a real time, and we're instigating or injecting a mythical hero like a hero, Heracles or something like that. Why did I just say Heracles? I'm not that guy. Hercules. Maybe my brain is just in old places right now. Um, but you can see in those quotes his inspiration. Like you can almost feel as you're reading about this dragon and this thief or this guy unintentionally stumbling into the dragon's hoard and taking something and then escaping and the dragon, bursting forth with flame and rage. You can see Frodo, not Frodo, Bilbo creeping around, finding the secret entrance, taking the one thing that he's looking for, and you can just see that. And then the wrath of Smaug coming out. You can see how he pulled his dragon, his big dragon, uh, almost straight from this storyline, and others like it. And so it's charming, it's wonderful, because one of the greats is borrowing. As a writer, that's there's a book called Steal Like an Artist, if you've never heard of it. And that's the concept, is that writers, musicians are constantly stealing, and that's just what they do. And then they tweak it and they make it more theirs or more part of their culture. But they're borrowing and adjusting, and it's just that's the way human creativity seems to work. It's almost always derivative. And I think that tells us something about not just the creative process, but our creator. We are derivative. So therefore our creativity would be. Um for me it was sirens. So I wrote in my book, The Treasure of Capric, that one back there on the shelf, right there. Um, there's a whole chapter, a couple of chapters where there's sirens threatening the boat of the hero, and then the follow up is a direct rescue effort on the island of the sirens, which is just fun, but a little bit more scary, a little bit more violence in that one. But yeah, the idea of these ancient monsters coming from ancient stories and putting them into modern fantasy, that's just expected almost. That's what we're going to do. Even dragons. Dragons are going to be something else. We don't get too many trolls like Grendel anymore. Maybe those should come back, but for some reason they don't inspire quite the same amount of fear. All right, let's move on. Let's see. Let's look at some movie trailers and talk about why the movies can't seem to get it right. All right, we're going to share screen, share the window, also share audio. Here we go. All right, this is the one you're probably familiar with, 2007. The first attempt at CGI.
Are you the one they call Beowulf? Such a strong man you are. A man like you could own the greatest tale ever sung. Beowulf, stay with me.
All right, so the whole trailer so far is Grendel's mother tempting him, which is not in the poem at all, and it shows you the direction. We talked about storytellers having messages in their stuff. This is it.
Give me a son, and I shall make you the greatest king that ever lived. This, I swear. You will forever be king. Forever strong. Mighty. Beyond imagination.
What are you? She's not my curse. Not anymore.
All right, we're a minute and 40 in, and we have had maybe 3 seconds of Grendel, which is the bulk of the original tale, or it's the biggest section. And what everybody kind of remembers, the fight with the mother is so short. Most people don't remember it. Let me see what the finish is up here before we make any other comments. It's just that stuff. There's no last thing. There's a picture of the Grendel they made, and yeah, they almost make him like a pathetic, uh, you know, I don't know. He's like an elephant man type of thing. He's whiny, and he's the only character in the show that speaks in Old English, and he does it with like a lilt and a serious rolling, and he's like calling out to his mommy, "Mama, they harm me, they harm me," and it's like it's got subtitles on there, but it's just he sounds like and looks like a deformed, like mentally damaged thing. That's this pathetic creature, but he's super strong, and he has this eardrum on his outer ear that hurts him when they're making their noise in the hall. And that's so, I mean, like, they're trying to make you feel bad for him, so they're inverting who the monster is. He is no longer an enemy of God who hates all good. He is this poor creature who just wants to live life in peace, but they won't shut up. Like, he's a grumpy old neighbor in a giant, you know, deformed baby body. It's kind of crazy. Um, he with the whole thing with Angelina Jolie and Beowulf and the seduction stuff, and it's this powerful men can't. It's a Me Too kind of movie. Powerful men can't help themselves. They're going to take the bait and fall for this woman thing and whatever she's promising. She's promising power, but hey, they get to lie with her as well. So you get in this version, Grendel is actually Hrothgar's illegitimate child, and the dragon that kills Beowulf is Beowulf's illegitimate child. And so it's just this great men. There can't be any great men. That's kind of the message of the story and why it's really just no good. There can't be any great men. They are all going to give in to the temptation, and because they want power and wealth, and it ruins the rest of their lives and then ultimately kills them. But then the next guy's in line, he's also going to fall. It's just it's Hollywood. It's Hollywood. And this was 2007. So it's like it's nothing new. It just wasn't as crazy woke as some of the newer stuff. This one I found online as well. 2005 with oh shoot, what's his name? We'll see it in there, I'm sure. This one's already got kind of more interesting landscapes and stuff, but the quality is pretty low. You can see this is fairly low budget. This giant guy rolling around with his troll baby. That kid has a beard. All right, he grew up. Gerard Butler.
Oh, here we go.
By the gods, it's good to see you.
What are we fighting here?
Your troll. Weirdly enough, he has a name.
Grendel. I know he was wronged, but I will see Valhalla or that thing's head on a pole.
The troll broke down these doors with 20 Danish warriors sleeping inside. What gives 13 Geats better hope?
We won't be sleeping.
So in this one, they've gone definitely with more of a little bit more in line with the story of the poem, in that there is this troll-like monster. We don't get him completely monstrous, but he's like a troll, and you got the right guys. They've got some of the scenes that aren't as obvious in the other version. Excuse me. I forgot to mention in the animated version from 2007, they bring in Christianity as having just arrived in the kingdom, rather than being pagans who just happen to talk about Christianity or the Christian God. And so they've like got one of the guys converting between the killing of Grendel and the dragon, and then it ends up being kind of anti-Christian in a way that the poem is very pro-Christian. So that's obviously again Hollywood. In this one, they make it about a blood feud. Instead of it being, oh, this is your illegitimate son that you got through a curse, a promise, magical promise. This one is like this blood feud, and it's ridiculous. Because again, Hollywood is trying to make you feel bad for the monster whose dad got killed. And so of course he's going to seek revenge and take out all these guys. And Beowulf is coming in to stop it, and Beowulf ends up, getting the real story and having the feels for the monster, but still feeling like, oh no, we still got to stop it though. So Grendel's mom never comes into it, but we see these moments of like Grendel is trying to use speech and throwing rocks at Beowulf, and he figures out, oh, he's not just a dumb brute monster; he's actually able to talk. It just becomes a completely different story because of Hollywood. Costumes are pretty cool. I think they tried to go for a
will help you kill him.
proper time. The other thing they bring into this one is the woman. Now, again,
Nothing I say will help you kill him.
Beowulf is supposed to be a mighty hero who's got virtue and goodness, and they bring in this woman. Oddly enough, the only person in the film with an American accent is a witch who is, come from somewhere else and is, despised by all the people in the village, but, she knows things, and she even knows the monster. So we should respect her and listen to her. And he falls for her, and it's like, yeah, just take away all the virtue of this hero. Let's do that, please. Yeah, sure. That'll make us like the story better. Add some sex to it. It's ridiculous. It becomes less of a story. It becomes less hopeful and less meaningful because the hero is now compromised morally in a couple of ways, and the monster is no longer a monster. The bad guy is no longer the villain. It's like it's just morally gray. This one has a hilarious Grendel's mother, though. Grendel's mother in this one does pop up as this crazy like vampire lady. It's pretty funny. The quality is not the highest. All right, let's look at. Okay, I have not seen this one, but I want to watch the trailer with you, and then I want to get to the last interpretation I saw here.
In the future lies a fortress at the edge of darkness. The enemy is at the gate, but the real terror is within.
Oh, it's got to be good.
More than mortal.
They're making Mortal Kombat puns about Mortal. Oh, man. It's got to be good, right? It's
Born half of heaven and half of hell is their only salvation.
No sane man would come here to face this thing. I'm not like other men.
That you will have to prove. You can sense it. You can feel it.
Is that Pamela Anderson?
Christopher Lambert is...
You should be dead.
Many times.
Beowulf.
Oh, the 90s. Oh my goodness. Oh, that came out the year I graduated from. I am so shocked that my friends and I did not go see that because we got into Beowulf and did very silly things around Beowulf. Even though we didn't read the whole story in high school. We read we read sections of it. And we created a model of the fight against Beowulf's mother by creating a plexiglass box and putting the model in, and then filling the void underneath a little bit of land on top and on the bottom, and filled it with hair gel so that it looked like water. And we had a little figurine, like a Dungeons and Dragons style figurine or Warhammer type, and put him in there and about to dive in. And there, so we would have totally gone for this. This would have been our chance to mock a movie on Friday night. And now, this past year, Netflix released a series that is potentially worse. I'm really not entirely sure. I've watched about 2 episodes of this just to understand what it is.
Famed was this Beowulf.
Okay, right there, we already see This is straight up fantasy, modern fantasy. They've got this weird like bear goat thing.
Famed was this.
Where is it?
Beowulf.
Yeah, this weird like bear goat, gorilla goat thing. Right in the first scene.
Far flew the boast of him.
Beowulf. He's back.
Come warriors willing, should war draw nigh.
I'm here to see Hrothgar.
Hrothgar's dead.
So he shows up at accidentally for Hrothgar's funeral, and here we go.
Kill him.
As they neared the foe.
It's a skin shifter!
Harmful in heart and hated of God.
When you said you parted badly, how badly?
Still need that blade of yours fixed?
Rates wishes to see himself made Jarl of the Shieldlands instead of you.
I mean, you can obviously already see there's so much diversity in Anglo, or in 700 Scandinavia, like in ways that wouldn't be. So it's totally just fantasy. Like I don't care, honestly, if you want to have a fantasy story and mix it up. If you want to keep it authentic to the story, be authentic to the story. Come on. So this is just kind of again, got nothing wrong with bringing it in if you want to do a fantasy, but do your own fantasy. Don't try to hijack somebody else's story and then tell a story that is completely different. Because yeah, like I said, Hrothgar's dead, and his wife is, and son are trying to take over. She wants to rule. Beowulf is not welcome when he had kind of spent some years growing up in the kingdom, and yeah, it's this like court drama thing.
I'll never be Hrothgar, but I will rule.
All my born are killers. It's in their blood.
And what's in yours?
You don't belong here. Never did.
I was born a warrior, and I'll die one.
All right. Oh, missed it.
Born a warrior, and I'll die one.
There's Grendel. Not quite the deformed baby, but kind of a mutant dog monkey. Yeah, close to a troll. I think that's pretty cool. It's kind of terrifying. It's definitely got the toothy mouth, but there you go.
Why did you save me? We all make mistakes.
And this young lady, who you think is, the love interest for Beowulf, again, they're pulling in a love interest, which is not in the original story. This is Grendel's mother, and she's a shapeshifter. So it's, again, totally different. Beowulf ends up saving her life. I'm sure there's going to be some seduction later on down the road. It just does not follow the storyline. There's this whole like other tribe cult thing that is, anyway, the savages maybe in the anyway. It's not Beowulf. It's just not Beowulf. It has the name, but it is not the thing. It is not the story, and the virtue is not there because they've tried to make it modern, cool, even down to the music.
Who leads us?
I will avenge you.
All right, so there we go. There we go. There's the modern versions of Beowulf that we have that are not great. They're not great. None of them are very good. And I would say the other thing that they get rid of is the newer movies especially, they remove the drama of the supernatural, either by making Grendel just a large man who's kind of freakish, or he's supernatural, but Beowulf can't be. So in these other stories, Beowulf may be strong, but he's not so strong that he could rip his arm off. He has to use a tool or some other form of leverage or something to do it. So it's just they're downplaying the hero, and they're lifting up and almost idolizing the villains so that you sympathize with them, and then you get moral confusion. Whereas the original book has so much moral clarity in it. So I would say, man, get young men reading Beowulf for real. If you've got comments on this, I'd love to hear them. We're writing more stories here that are aimed at good, virtuous examples and moral virtue, both for, young kids all the way up to adults. Working on a story series right now that is uh, aimed at kind of young adult, middle school kind of age group, about a family going through trials and having to be on the run on survival because the government has changed, and kind of creating this adventure survival with a tyrannical government. It's not full dystopia, but it's that direction, with this survival element of family on the run and trying to, or captured and trying to get back together. I've got my fantasy series, The King of the Caves, still working on some of that. And pretty soon I've got a book coming out on courage for, let me pull up an example here. Book coming out on courage that I worked on. Not dog toys. This one's for kids who are just starting to read on their own. It is Dog Nights, and it's kind of a playful thing of a dog who is in a modern setting, but he imagines he's a knight, and it really just changes the perspective of everybody around him over time. And he's using the imagination to become the thing he wants to be, to become courageous and moral, and not to be a coward. We'll get into some other stuff that is expected out this summer, but you'll hear more about that if you're following me over on Substack or on YouTube. I just think let's go ahead and get some more strong stories that are entertaining and fun, but also have a lot of good virtue, whether it's the character's example or the villain's badness. You get the picture of virtue and goodness, and what we aspire to. So that's what I'm working on over here. I hope you enjoyed this talk about Beowulf. I hope that you read the poem. And if I did not give it away, I was planning on giving a copy away, plus a few other goodies. I'll throw one of my books in there. To enter that, I'm going to pick my winner tomorrow, June 8th. Oh my gosh, I just realized I could have totally made all of my teenagers cringe at church today, because today is 6/7. Oh my gosh. Anyway, I'm giving away a couple of books and a couple of goodies. If you'd like to enter to win, go over to any of those essays on Beowulf and leave a comment. And tomorrow I will take all the people who commented, I'll throw them in a mixer. So it very likely you got a good chance to win. And I will pick the winner and let them know who's won, and send them the stuff. So if you join me even for a little bit of this, thank you. I appreciate your time. And let me know if you liked it. Give it a thumbs up or leave a comment. And hope to see you next time. I'll try this again.